My mother-in-law's gifts are always cheap. She probably thinks Walmart is heaven. Laughter burst around the dinner table, sharp and cutting like daggers straight into my heart. I sat frozen, my hands trembling slightly beneath the table. Before I could steady myself, my own son's voice, Andrew's, rang out cold and bitter. Good thing we make our own money, otherwise relying on Mom. The table roared again. I lowered my head, swallowing the lump in my throat, fighting back tears that threatened to fall before their eyes. I had never felt this kitchen so icy, not even on a Thanksgiving night, filled with turkey, mashed potatoes, and wine. Each laugh, each word felt like salt being rubbed into an open wound. Brittany, my daughter-in-law, kept going, her voice dripping with mockery. Honestly, at first I thought Mom had some taste in shopping, but it turns out it's always the cheapest stuff. To be real, if it weren't for holiday manners, I'd have laughed in her face already. I bit down hard on my lip. Every word she spoke made me shrink smaller and smaller, like a stranger misplaced in my own family. Yet what cut me twice as deep was not Brittany's cruelty, but Andrew's cowardly silence. My son sat there, eyes fixed on his plate of turkey, hands clenched tight, but not once did he defend me. He knew better than anyone who was paying the mortgage for this grand house. He knew that without me, they wouldn't even have this table to gather around. And still, he chose silence to protect a pride already cracked. The table was laid out beautifully, golden roast turkey, steaming with fragrance, bowls of dark red cranberry sauce, buttery mashed potatoes, and the pies Brittany had so meticulously prepared. Glasses clinked, voices rang with joy. To an outsider, it was the picture of a warm, happy Thanksgiving. But for me, every second was endurance, bitterness, and restraint. The aroma of food no longer reached me. My throat only tightened as though someone was strangling me. I glanced around the table, everyone laughing, chatting, as if the insults were no more than a harmless joke. And me, the mother who carried the weight of their financial burdens, could only sit in silence, swallowing tears. At one point, I wanted to stand up, slam the thick stack of mortgage receipts on the table, and scream, "If it weren't for me, none of you would even have this roof over your heads to mock me under." But then my granddaughter Ellie's eyes met mine. She was smiling innocently, still playing with crumbs on her plate. I sighed, forcing the pain down. I couldn't let Ellie witness her grandmother turning into the cause of a holiday scene, so I chose silence. But silence does not mean it doesn't hurt. On the contrary, silence made me feel smaller, lonelier, like I was disappearing from my own family. I knew why Andrew stayed quiet. His male pride towered high. To him, it was better to let his wife insult his mother right to his face than admit his own failure that his family was living off his mother's money. But what was that pride if not a knife driven straight into my heart? The sting of Brittany's contempt hurt, but the sharper wound came from my son, the boy I had raised, the one I placed all my hopes in, now sitting silently letting his mother be shamed. The feast stretched on for another hour, but to me each minute dragged like a lifetime. They talked about vacations, jobs, friends, but it all blurred like mist. All I felt was a hollow emptiness. I quietly placed some salad on my plate, chewing without tasting. In my mind, a cruel refrain echoed, "Mom's gifts are always cheap." Those words hammered against my heart. When the dinner ended, laughter lingered as they washed dishes and cleaned up. I excused myself, saying I felt tired, and stepped out onto the porch. The air was freezing, but at least it cleared my head. I stood there staring at the golden light spilling from the kitchen window, hearing the echoes of laughter inside. Bitterness surged in me like never before. I once thought that silence and patience could keep a family whole. But that Thanksgiving night I faced a brutal truth. My silence didn't protect this family. It only made me their joke. That night I returned home late. In my small room, I opened the cupboard and looked at the thick pile of bank receipts, the proof of years of sacrifice. Each slip of paper was like a wound, reminding me that it was my hands that kept a roof over my son and his family. And in return, a mocking laugh. A bowed, cowardly silence. I sat long by the window, staring at the shimmering lake under the moonlight. And slowly, silently, but firmly, a decision began to take shape in me. I could not go on like this any longer. There are nights when I sit alone by the window, staring out at the lake. I remember the day Andrew came to me, his face pale, his eyes swollen red. That day he sank into the kitchen chair of my little house, shoulders weighed down as if carrying a stormy sky. I poured him a cup of hot tea and listened to his trembling voice. "Mom, I'm scared of losing the house. I really don't know what to do. Please, help me pay the mortgage. I just lost my job." I looked straight into my son's eyes and saw a despair I had never witnessed before. The boy I raised, the one I thought would grow strong enough to protect his family, now sat shivering like a child. Quietly, I stood and opened the wooden cabinet in my bedroom. Inside was an old savings book I had kept for years since my days working at the town library. Every pension check, every small bit of savings I had gathered, not for myself, but for my children and grandchildren's future. My hands trembled as I pulled out the bills. The familiar scent of old paper carried a different weight that day, the weight of motherhood, of silent sacrifice. I placed the money in front of Andrew and said firmly, "As long as this roof stays over the children's heads, I'll take care of it." Andrew bowed his head, covering his face with both hands, and wept like a child. I pulled him close, held him in my arms. It felt like when he was little, running back to me after a fall. Stroking his hair, I whispered, "Everything will be all right, Andrew. As long as you keep trying, I'll be here." From that day forward, I began quietly sending the monthly mortgage payments. I never told Brittany, and I never asked Andrew to make it public. I thought silence was the best way to preserve his pride, to keep his marriage from splintering further. Each month, as I sat before the computer screen entering the bank details, I whispered to myself, "As long as this house stands, Ellie will have a peaceful childhood." Sometimes I tightened my own budget so much that meals were nothing but bread and eggs. Yet I never complained. I believed a mother's love and sacrifice have no limits. Andrew knew exactly where every cent came from, but to keep face with his wife, he always pretended. Whenever Brittany asked about finances, Andrew would smirk. "Don't worry, I've got it under control. I'm starting a new job soon." Hearing that, I felt both sorrow and anger. Sorrow because I knew he only wanted to preserve his pride. Anger because he was slipping deeper into dependence, losing the drive to work, to shoulder the responsibility of a husband and father. Brittany, on the other hand, believed her husband was the sole breadwinner, the pillar of their home, and so she had every reason to belittle him and, of course, to despise me. Once, when I brought over some vegetables from my garden, Brittany glanced at the basket and smirked. "Oh, thanks, Mom. Saves us a few bucks at the supermarket." Harmless words on the surface, but they pierced like needles. She had no idea that the thousands spent on the mortgage each month, so much more than those few greens, came from me. But I stayed silent. I told myself, as long as Andrew and Ellie were safe under that roof, I could set aside my pride. Yet every time it happened, a part of me cracked a little more. Over time, Andrew stopped even pretending to look for work. He slept more, played games more, and sank into the false stability I had built for him. I watched him heart-twisting. I thought helping him through hardship would give him the chance to rise again. But in truth, my silent sacrifice only taught him to forget his own responsibilities. For so long, Brittany lived in the illusion that she was the only one carrying the family. Every look she gave me was laced with arrogance. And Andrew, rather than tell the truth, chose silence, letting her believe I was nothing. I don't fully blame Brittany. If I were her, maybe I'd think the same. The greatest fault lies with Andrew, my son. His silence hid the truth, turning me into a useless old woman in their eyes. There are nights when I sit alone, thinking of it all. I feel like a shadow in their home. I am there, sacrificing, carrying the weight, but unseen. All the praise, all the recognition flows to Brittany. And me, I'm nothing more than the stingy old mother bringing cheap gifts. Each time I recall Brittany's Thanksgiving jab, she probably thinks Walmart is heaven. My heart burns. None of them knew that I was the silent heaven itself, holding up every brick and wall of that house. Despite their scorn, I kept sending money month after month. I thought someday Andrew would wake up, defend his mother, reveal the truth to Brittany, but that day never came. Instead, the meals grew colder, the laughter sharper, more cruel. And in the darkness, I began to promise myself, if it happens one more time, if I'm humiliated again, I will not stay silent. Andrew, I've been silent far too long. The night after Thanksgiving, I sat alone clutching the thick stack of receipts in my hands. They felt like a wordless diary recording every year I bore the burden. But they were also proof the truth buried all this time. I knew the day that truth comes to light, nothing will be able to hide it again. That night after the Thanksgiving dinner, I went home in silence. The Denver sky had sunk into a deep purple, the streetlights flickering as if trying to comfort me. But inside, all that remained was a bitter emptiness. Brittany's sneer, Andrew's humiliating words still rang in my ears. My mother-in-law's gifts are always cheap. She probably thinks Walmart is heaven. Good thing my wife makes money. If it were up to me, Mom and I would be renting by now. 2 blades, one from my daughter-in-law, one from my own son, struck deep into my heart at once. I had thought I was used to their contempt, but that night I realized I could no longer endure it. I sat on the wooden chair by the window, laying the stack of payment receipts in front of me. Each slip of paper, each bank record seemed to whisper, "Linda, this is your blood, your sweat, your life." And yet in their eyes, I was only a stingy old woman bringing cheap gifts. I looked into the mirror, an old face, sunken eyes, white hair. I asked myself, Linda, what have you done with your life? Have you ever lived for yourself or only for others? The answer brought tears. All my life I had sacrificed, carried the weight in silence, hoping for just one word of thanks, one sign of respect. But in return, only scorn. That night I did not sleep. I paced the wooden floor of my small house, heart pounding. Outside, the winter wind howled through the cracks. Inside my head, one thought rose clearer than ever. It's time to stop. Not one more dollar, Linda, not one. I was afraid that if I stopped, Andrew's family would collapse, afraid little Ellie would suffer. But then another voice rose within me. The truth must come out. If you keep hiding it, your son will never grow up, and your daughter-in-law will never stop despising you. I knew this decision wasn't just about money. It was about cutting the chain that bound me in the dark. The next morning, I brewed a strong black coffee and sat before my computer. The monthly mortgage payment reminder popped up again. I stared at the familiar numbers. For years, I would type my password, send the money, bow my head in silence. But this time, my hands stopped. I typed nothing. I pressed cancel. A strange feeling spread through me, trembling yet light, as if after all these years I had finally slipped free of an invisible chain wound around my heart. It didn't take long. Just a few weeks later, Andrew called. His voice was hoarse, panicked. "Mom," the bank sent a notice. "What happened? This month's payment hasn't gone through." I closed my eyes, drew a deep breath. My heart ached, but my voice was steady. "Andrew, from today, I won't pay for you anymore. It's time you take care of your own family." Silence on the other end. I could hear his ragged breathing, his panic. Then he shouted, "Mom, you can't do this. If we lose the house, what will I do? Ellie will end up on the street." Tears burned my eyes. God, how I loved Ellie. But I knew if I kept going, Andrew would never grow. "Andrew, do you remember the first time you begged me? You promised you would try that, you would get back up. But what have you done since you let your wife believe you carried the family while I silently paid the debt? You let me become the useless one in her eyes. And worst of all, you stayed silent while I was humiliated right in front of you." My voice broke, but each word struck like stone. "I will not be a slave to your silence anymore." I've stopped. I hung up and collapsed into my chair, covering my face. The pain was sharp, like 1,000 needles piercing my heart. Never had I imagined I would refuse my own son. And yet, in the midst of that pain, a small fire flickered to life, the fire of freedom. For the first time in years, I felt I was living for myself. Not for my son's pride, not to keep up a lie, but for the raw truth I had done enough. That night, I stood before the mirror again. This time, I did not see a miserable old mother. I saw a woman who dared to stand to say enough. I whispered to myself, voice hoarse but clear, Linda. From now on, you will no longer live to be scorned. You will live to be respected, if not by others, then at least by yourself. And in that moment, I knew this bitter decision was the doorway to a new chapter of my life. There is a harsh truth I have learned after 70 years of life. Sometimes a mother can only watch her child sink into the abyss, unable to reach out. Because the more you try to pull him up, the deeper you are dragged down yourself. And now that is exactly where I stand. Just 1 month after I stopped sending money, the letter from the bank landed in Andrew's mailbox. I wasn't there, but I could imagine Brittany tearing open the envelope, skimming a few lines, then screaming. That afternoon, Andrew called me, his voice shaking. Mom. I don't know what to say. Brittany found out about the debt. She's furious. I stayed silent, listening to the chaos spilling through the line, banging on the table, sobbing, screaming curses. That house, which once seemed so solid, was now trembling to its core. I wanted to cry, to run and hold Andrew and little Ellie, but I also knew this was the price of their illusions. A few days later, I visited Ellie. The door opened, and there stood Brittany, her face, gaunt eyes, swollen red from crying and rage. She didn't greet me. Instead, she said coldly, "You know, I never imagined my husband was a liar. All this time, I thought we were carrying everything on our own, and behind it all, there was you." The way she spat out the word, you stabbed at my chest. She didn't see love, didn't see the silent sacrifices, only the humiliation of being deceived. I said nothing as I stepped inside. Ellie ran to me, wrapping her little arms tightly around my waist as if to say, "Grandma, don't leave me." I held her close, my heart breaking. That evening, I sat in their living room and watched Brittany interrogate Andrew. "You said you had it handled. You said our finances were stable. So where's the money? How long have you been lying to me?" she screamed. Andrew lowered his head, hands trembling. "I didn't want you to look down on me. Mom helped me. Every month she sent the money so we could keep this house." The room went silent. Brittany turned to me, eyes blazing. Then she swung back to Andrew, laughing bitterly. "So you're nothing but a man living off his mother. And me. I thought I had a husband who could carry us." Andrew buried his face in his hands, collapsing into the chair. I watched my son, my heart twisting. He had once been a proud, headstrong boy who promised he would be the rock for his family. Now, before his wife and child, he crumbled like a child himself. I sat there, fists gripping my clothes, tasting bitterness. All this time, I thought I was doing right by staying silent, letting Andrew keep his pride. But what was the truth? It was my silence that had nurtured his weakness. It was my money that built his illusion. And now, with the truth exposed, his whole family was collapsing. I felt guilt. I felt sorrow. But above all, I saw one truth. Clearly, no one can save another forever. After that day, Andrew's family plunged into crisis. I often heard from Ellie, her little voice trembling, as she told me her parents fought all night, that she was so scared she just wanted to sleep at my house. Brittany grew colder toward Andrew. Once I heard she even moved back to her mother's house for a few days. Andrew drowned himself in alcohol, avoiding work, avoiding every responsibility. I watched from a distance, my heart in pieces. But I mustn't intervene. If I reached in again, everything would fall back into the same old rut. Many nights I sat by the window of my wooden house, watching the town lights flicker in the distance, asking myself, was I too cruel? Did I push my son into a dead end? But then the memory of that Thanksgiving night would return. The mocking laughter, the scornful eyes, the cowardly silence. I knew if I hadn't chosen to stop, I would have spent the rest of my life in torment. Perhaps being a mother sometimes means letting your child fall hard so he finally learns to stand. One evening, Andrew came to my house. He looked haggard, unshaven, his eyes bloodshot. He slumped into a chair, burying his head in his hands. "Mom, I was wrong. I let my wife insult you. I let you be humiliated right in front of me. I was a coward. I hid behind empty pride. I know asking for your help now is useless, but please forgive me." I quietly poured him a cup of hot tea. Watching his hands tremble as he held it, my heart softened. But I didn't say I forgive you. I only whispered, Andrew, forgiveness isn't in words. It's in whether you truly change. And in his eyes, for the first time, I saw a glimmer of light, faint, fragile, but the light of a man trying to find himself again. That night, after Andrew left, I sat on the porch with Ellie in my arms. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, Grandma, will Mom and Dad stop fighting? I hugged her tightly, whispering back, things will be different. Ellie, sometimes for a house to be rebuilt strong, it has to endure a storm first. And deep inside, though it hurt, I knew this storm was necessary. It would teach Andrew the lesson my years of sheltering him never could. There are moments in life when you wish you could close your ears shut, your eyes pretend you didn't hear, didn't see. I had hidden, endured only to preserve a fragile scrap of my son's pride. But now there was no hiding left. Andrew lifted his head. His eyes were red wet, the look of a boy caught in a lie. His voice trembled hoarse. Yes, it was Mom. Since the day I lost my job, she saved us. Every month she sent the money so we wouldn't lose the house. The room fell silent. Brittany froze, her mouth open, words stuck in her throat. Andrew turned toward me. In his eyes I saw it all, shame, guilt, layers of regret. He dropped to his knees before me, hands clenched, his voice breaking apart. Mom, I'm so pathetic. You carried my whole family and I let my wife insult you right in front of me. I stayed silent for my pride, but I destroyed everything. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Tears blurred my eyes. I had dreamed of the day Andrew would admit his wrongs, but when it finally came, my heart felt both lighter and unbearably heavy. Quietly, I opened my bag and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were all the receipts, every single transfer, month after month, never missing one. I placed them on the table, my voice calm but cutting. This is the price of silence. You could deceive your wife, but you cannot hide the truth. It's all here. The shuffle of paper filled the room like knives slicing through the heavy air. Brittany stared at the numbers, her face shifting from shock to shame to fury. But this time she had no mocking words. Andrew bowed his head into his knees, shoulders shaking. No one spoke for what felt like endless minutes. I sat there watching my son kneel before me, my daughter-in-law stunned, my granddaughter clutching my hand, as if afraid I too would leave her. Inside me, emotions clashed, sorrow, bitterness, and yes, a sharp flicker of vindication. At last, the truth had spoken. At last, I could no longer be dismissed. I closed my eyes and felt more at peace than ever. Not because I had completely forgiven Andrew or Brittany, but because I had forgiven myself for the years of silence, for the tears I shed alone. Now I lived for the present, for Ellie, for the values that truly matter, and that for me was the greatest victory.